Hello and welcome to the introduction of the Altered State podcast. My name is Roald Kala and I will be your host. This podcast is for people who are into self-development as well as psychedelics, but I wanted to include other altered states besides psychedelics, and I wanted to have conversations around this because altered states are an important key component to, this guy wants to play it, to your personal self-development. And definitely to my personal self-development. Utilizing different altered states is a very important component, and recognizing, sometimes looking back at life where we were in an altered state and what we learned from that is really useful. So I thought it'd be a great method of being able to have psychedelic conversations as well as venturing into other states, because at the end of the day, what's the most important thing here is the lessons that we learn and how we can share those with each other. So I hope everyone gets a lot of value from this podcast. And during this introductory episode, I'll just talk a little bit about my own experience, go over some of the altered state go over some of the altered states I've experienced in my life and how they affected me. I've not necessarily had an easy life, and there was a lot of things to that. Main thing is I was misdiagnosed as a kid being autistic. This happened when I was like 5, 6, I'm not exactly sure, but my generation, there's a lot of misdiagnoses going on there because the psychological systems and everything, I believe they're just kind of being set up from what I learned and didn't really have enough time to test through that. And for me, my scenario, what happened is I actually had a milk allergy, which I wasn't aware of, and I would just drink milk every day. I'm from the Netherlands, I love my cheese and I love my milk. I still love these things. Can't have them that much anymore, here and there. But the symptoms of this milk allergy looked similar to some of the things you'd look at when you are trying to diagnose autism. What the milk allergy did to me is kind of gave me a tunnel vision, and then this got compounded by what I believe from the ages of 12 to 18, I had Lyme's disease without being aware of it. And all of this coincided in me having an insanely deep victim mindset, where I believed I had autism. I believed everything the doctors were saying and all of that. And I learned a lot from that state, and most of that learning happened after I transitioned out of that state. When my aunt helped me figure out that I don't have autism, I have a milk allergy, and all this stuff just comes crumbling down. But before that, I used to be the guy who's like, everything else is to blame but me. And then going from that and being really set back by that, because being in the medical system, having autism, I didn't really have I didn't have the same level of education. I didn't go through the most, mainstream systems that we had in the Netherlands. So it kind of felt like the odd one out. And because of the Lyme's, I had zero energy. And compared to my peers, it's just super behind. And then finding out that all this shit's a lie really sucks. It really sucks, but the growth and the learning I had from that altered state of being sick and just knowing that was so phenomenal. What I did with the next 5 years of my life so from 18 to 23, holy shit, my life did a complete 180. It's hard. I can't. Has to be I should be talking with someone about this because it's much easier when being asked questions. That's why this is just an introduction. But the amount of growth, the amount of learning, the amount of catching up I had to do and did in those 5 years was nuts. You gotta understand, I was this virgin, socially awkward, almost zero social skills, fat kid. I was 150 kilos when I was 18, with almost 50% body fat, and just miserable. I just realized I've been handed a giant turd for my set of cards that I have to play live with Kashmir. And shit, that is one hell of an altered state to go from being in a victim state to altering your state to being, oh no, wait, I'm responsible. I've been lied to. I've been lying to myself. All of that made me angry, made me sad. I was deeply depressed, even to the point where, I didn't want to be here. But then I just, I always also had this insight. There was this part of me that was always thinking about how this works, how reality works. I just couldn't let go of things. I was super hyper aware that none of this shit makes sense. None of reality makes sense when you start thinking about it. Time didn't feel real to me. It's like, hey, I don't believe that time, I already didn't really believe that time worked the same way here as it does in some other states, which was later confirmed by some of my psychedelic experiences. So I was like, I am already in so much pain. I have this life right now. It's less painful to just do the work. Just go to the gym. Just do everything, as fucking hard as it is at that time, going from being so far behind to there. Just learn. Just keep going. Just keep improving. It's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 5 steps forward, 3 steps back. It's this chaotic ride. But as it turns out, 5 years later, I was almost married. I'm married now. But in those years, I lost all the weight. I gained my social skills. I did psychedelics and was interested in that. I learned about, I became a coach. I learned all of these skills and understandings that I have right now. I was not this person. It's like, sometimes it's a specific species of bamboo. It grows in the ground and it just grows very slowly, and then all of a sudden it just kicks up within, a week or something, and it just grows. That's what that period of my life felt like. It's like I was not alive before I was 18 years old. Really. And in a sense, I was not alive because everything was something else's fault. It wasn't my decision to be here. And right now, I'm looking at reincarnation and a lot of near-death experiences, which I would love to have on this podcast too, and those things. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really believe. I might have actually chosen to be here, to experience me as myself right now. And so may you, and traveling on the journey to trusting that, and trusting that life happens for us, and getting deeper and deeper into that perspective has been challenging and has been interesting and has me experiencing my intuition on a whole new level and rediscovering myself over and over. And really, that stage of being sick, having that Lyme's, not being able to work. You know what I was doing back then? I was either gaming, eating, or thinking about the fucking universe. I could not stop. This is kind of where my psychedelic journey began, was when I was between 12 and 18, 16 definitely. You know how they say with puberty, your mind just starts racing, it starts growing, whatever. I don't know what puberty is like for other people. I had headaches, and it could also have been the Lyme's, as a unique position there, like key developmental years, while you have this Lyme's thing going on in your body. I don't know how that would have affected me mentally, physically, in the long term, but after I did my cure, I was able to take oregano oil and cat's claw extract and fix that within a few months as well as no longer eat or drink any milk, and that really helped a lot too. But anyway, that's where my journey to psychedelics started. I was just thinking, trying to make sense of everything. I started learning a lot about epistemology and psychology. That's where the start of psychology started, but more philosophy mixed with psychology, esoterics, kind of things. I started at a very, like, I needed to understand this thing. How was infinity done? You know, how does this thing work? How does reality work? And it started there, but I also remember, like, before I was 12, I had this intuition kind of download. Everything is nothing and nothing is everything. And I just remember being in a swing in the woods somewhere with other people, and I was just saying this over and over. Everything is nothing, nothing is everything. Everything is nothing and nothing is everything. Just the fundamental realization that nothing doesn't exist without everything and vice versa. Everything implies nothing. Existence implies non-existence. Non-existence implies existence. They need each other to exist. That's how relativity works in a sense. And always felt this need to understand. And after losing a whole bunch of that weight, I started living by myself. I was first living with my aunt, and then I moved to Nijmegen to study, and that's where I learned how to be a coach. And I went to sports science studies, and that eventually ended up being there for a year, and then moving on and doing the rest of everything that I needed to learn myself, because they lied to me. But that's beside the point. When I was there, I moved into this place, and that's when I met my best friend, Abdur. He's going to be my first guest on the show next time. Kashmir is running around with toys here. Episode featuring Kashmir. Yeah, that's where I met this guy, and he was super insightful. I remember our first conversation. I believe he was, I don't know, he was in some type of altered state. I don't remember what, but we had a really interesting conversation, and you know, we had this amazing young guys. We had this amazing dynamic where we would talk about some things, like show each other stuff. Like, hey, I'm learning about meditation and this. Hey, I'm learning about that. Hey, I'm doing this. Hey, I'm doing that. So we tried out a whole bunch of different things, did a lot of workouts together, like working on our habits, like really beautiful self-development phase that, you know, I love him. He's my brother, so he's family to me. And just grew up with that, and he really also opened my mind further up to psychedelics. I was already interested in how reality worked and everything, but he brought the topic forward more. The only way I'd been introduced to this topic previously was like, don't do that, drugs are bad. You know, altered state's not bad, coffee ain't bad, you know, modafinil not bad at all. If you use these things correctly, anything you take, is it coffee, is it ayahuasca, is it weed, anything you take in excess becomes bad. Everything is neutral depending on how you use it, depending on the context and how you personally approach something. That will determine the outcome. There's a bad way to use ayahuasca. There is a bad intention to do mushrooms. You know, there is always, you choose the frame in which you use the substance. Substance isn't bad or evil or good. Are you using it consciously or not? Are you checking dosage? Are you making sure it's safe for you? Are you creating the right space for it? Do you have guidance? Did you do your research? You know, like, altered states, not bad. So, in essence, my most important altered state in life was being sick. But more than being sick, the unfoldment and the decision to make something of my life when it was put to the test and actually create something from it. Now it's now literally I'm 28 right now, so it's like 10 years later. I now live in the US, I'm married, I work remotely, or right now, last December, I've been laid off, but things happen. I'm working on some projects here on the side, doing some web development and everything. But all in all, things are good. Things are really good. And if you had told me 10 years ago that I'd be here right now the way I am, I wouldn't have believed you. Then the second most important things that were for my development, for my self-development and for my self-realization, really were the psychedelics. So I had my first ayahuasca experience with Abder in the Netherlands. It was an introductory experience. I had amazing body highs. I remember distinctly feeling, not an emotion, just masculine and feminine energy. It's like, I just know this is masculine energy that I feel. And it's just a feeling, but sometimes when you're on psychedelics, it's just so clear. This thing is that. It's undeniable. And those were dancing in my body, and I had a slight feeling of Mother Ayahuasca's presence, being there, showing me things. I had a conversation. We talked about the future and meeting a woman with long dark hair that you would marry, and naming my first kid, which hasn't been born yet. Just a very interesting ayahuasca experience, but not something that's like, hey kid, here's how reality works and everything. That is still ongoing, because I think you're working with infinity, you're working with non-duality, this kind of thing, the lessons, the teachings and the blessings, and they're infinite. They're infinitely faceted. The principles all have their rules and exceptions, hermetics, these different ways of navigating this idea. And from what I understand, it's being the infinite. So logically, you're not going to reach an end or conclusion to like, oh, I actually understand how everything works, because the nature of infinity, as soon as you understand it all, the next layer is added. It's not, or it's already added before you reach that layer. It's infinite, right? It doesn't have an end, it doesn't really have a beginning. But my first ayahuasca experience was important and set me up for some beautiful experiences. I remember traveling a lot during that time, and man. And then my next experiences were in Mexico. This was already when I met my wife. I took her there. We were there together, and we met a shaman, and we did a ceremony together. I get knocked out. My wife has a great experience. She was there for that. It was her first experience, and gets a lot of value from that. I just had a really good nap. It's a very expensive nap, And this has happened sometimes. But later, I did ayahuasca again, nothing happened. But then I did 5-MeO-DMT, and that experience is complete ego death, but you're still present, you're still there, and just infinitely aware, peaceful, everything's good. Beautiful, deep experience. Very important to see, and it's a direct experience of non-death, essentially. It's like the first real piece of proof as a direct experience, besides just hearing the stories, oh yeah, hearing incarnation and everything, really memory, really having that direct experience and touching it, so to say, of there is no death. And getting that feeling, getting that understanding. And my wife had a similar experience, and I think it's amazingly beautifully, wonderfully, it's so valuable, because you start letting go of that fear of death, and it's like, oh, actually, that might not be the way I thought about it before, or anyone's really thought about it before. And your perspective starts to change. The way you approach things in life starts to change. Oh, like, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to do this. It's like, no, it's like, I can do it in another life, or if I choose to come back here for that, then that's it. But is this really something I choose to have in my experience, or am I creating something bigger that needs my attention instead of this thing that's fun and I kind of want, but it's more like it's not the highest purpose of my life? Does this fit in with the highest vision of myself? And then you find that internal guidance and move in that direction. So you come at decisions from a different place. As well as just not being so afraid. And a perspective that's coming in more recently also is like, oh, death is just like another birth. Like, instead of being afraid of it or looking at this thing like, oh, it's really bad, you listen to enough near-death experiences, and part of me is like, this thing's kind of exciting. And if you know anything about what I always say, is that everything, the way you approach something determines what it's going to do, how it's going to respond. It's a co-creative effort, and you're coming from a different perspective makes all the difference. Everything self-development, the way you think about yourself, the way you approach life, the way you approach your relationships, it's almost all perspective. And the first thing, whenever I get stuck with something, I look for is a piece of perspective. And that's what I hope to give with this Altered State podcast. It's like, let's look at some of the shitty states we've been in and get the treasure from there. Let's get these perspectives to more people, as well as just having these conversations that I love, that I'm excited about, and meeting a lot of new people in this field. So that is, in a nutshell, my background, the altered states that have been most important in my personal development and self-realization, and the intro to this podcast series. I just thank you for being here. I love having these conversations. I hope to have a lot more of these, and thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.